Every year, my family celebrates an Indian festival known as Rakhi on a grand scale. We have lights decorating the outside of our house. My mom cooks a variety of dishes, and, of course, desserts. My favorite part. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the cultural holiday, the sister ties a decorated thread onto the wrist of her brother, and in return, he promises to always protect her. However, ever since I understood the reasoning behind it all, I have insisted upon my brother tying a thread on my wrist as well. Not for the sake of gender equality, although that is a huge topic in itself, but because I want to show him that I will always have his back. This part of the year is extremely important to me because of how close I am to my brother, and I get to weed out a couple presents. I mean, who doesn't like that? But on a more serious note, I feel that this tradition represents a way I take an ancient culture that I have been surrounded by ever since I was born, and interpret and mold it into something that fits my ideals and circumstances, thus forming a part of my own unique culture. Today, if not anything else, I want to plant a seed of thought on how we approach culture, what we take to heart, and how each one of us holds something so unique due to our individual circumstances. I'm sure that the topic I will be speaking of is dear to many, if not all of you, sitting in the audience today. Due to the attention media has drawn to it, the clashes between the old generations and the new, the internet, and everyone on a mission to discover themselves. Without further ado, my topic is the impact of culture on self-concept and relationships with others. Let's begin with the operational definitions by which I will be basing my assertions. The 4 words that must be specified would include impact, culture, self-concept, and relationships. Impact is the measure of tangible and intangible effects or consequences, one thing's or entity's action or influence upon another. Culture refers to the cumulative deposit of knowledge, experience, beliefs, values, religion, and roles acquired by a group of people in the course of generations through individual and group strivings. Self-concept is the idea or mental image one has of oneself and one's strengths, weaknesses, status, etc. And finally, a relationship is the way in which 2 or more concepts, objects, or people are related. Now, my question to you all is, what is your culture? I don't mean the things you are meant to have due to what your family says, although that does tend to play a great role, what your ethnic group expects, or any other such things. I mean what you believe, what expectations you have, that ritual or behavior you follow, and onwards. I hope that as I dwell further, it will motivate you all to take a deeper look. I personally began to search deeper into the beliefs I previously followed blindly and customs I altered subconsciously when I started to see how different I was from those of my parents' country and those who surrounded me as I grew up. I was lucky enough to live in the US where everyone has a heritage of a different part of the world, making it easier to be different. Ever since I was 2 years old, I have visited India at least every other year for lengthening periods of time. And each time I went, I began to see myself as more and more of an outsider looking in. As I stated before, each individual has a unique culture, but this took it to a whole other level. I mean, I was born and raised here, but I assumed that I would have a more significant connection with those in India, because that is the general culture by which my parents raised me. I was shocked to find out this could not be farther from the truth. In fact, outside some religious customs, language, and general festivals, my personal culture was far different than that of, say, cousins my age living there. Moving forward, I would like to speak of a topic that is close to my heart, not only because I was in India during the time of, and because it opened my eyes to the realities, but because I saw how a society takes some bad occurrence, battles against it, and fights to dig up the root of the problem. Before going into this emotional piece, I would like to clearly state that the actions I will be acknowledging take place all around the world, some being given far more attention than others, and would like to stress the importance of taking a stance on it. After all, as George Herbert clearly puts it, do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand and work with whatever tools you may have at your command, and better tools will be found as you go along. The Delhi rape case took place in India, 2012, or my sophomore year of high school. At the time, I had gone to visit my cousins in Mumbai during our Christmas vacation. I was stunned when I heard about it, as up till that point, I was basically living in a bubble. I'd heard of rape and all those things, but as we all do when we hear about terrifying events, I imagined it to be an action of another universe. During that visit, things came crashing down as I watched society's reaction. For those of you who are not very familiar with the facts of the Delhi rape case, it was about a girl who had gone on a bus with her male friend. And after some time, it was only them and 6 other men on that bus. Those 6 men beat her friend, gang raped her, pulled out some of her organs, and threw her off of a moving bus. She was 23 years old, for crying out loud. I can't even begin to imagine the trauma and pain she went through. To say the least, this led to the girl being hospitalized in Singapore. She died 2 weeks later. But since society heard of her hospitalization, protests began in Delhi. My cousins, all the way in Mumbai, began receiving texts to join the movement. Many people did, in fact, travel from all around the country to join in it. They were upset at the government for not giving immediate and severe punishment. All on the news, the protesters were seen holding signs such as, "Hang the rapists," and "Leave the rapists to the public so we can torture them." They were identified and labeled by their actions. Just think about that. What we have to realize is that the culture they were surrounded by plays a huge part in their actions. The reason the rapists gave for their actions was, and this is translated, she was out with a boy, she was out too late, and we were teaching her a lesson. That right there hints at the culture they were surrounded by. As Kaimini Jaiswal says, what we see in the bigger pictures and metros is not the true picture. Many places in India, especially the poorer villages, have an extremely patriarchal way of life to the extent of saying, and once again translated, if you do not hit your wife in the morning and in the night, you are not a man. This implies that society's individuals would mock them if they did not abide by these rules. In cases, they themselves would be beat for going against the traditions of keeping females below them. That is the surrounding many of these people grew up in. It is in our nature to conform, and it is in theirs as well. This goes back to the idea of nature versus nurture. The rapists were not born rapists. I strongly agree with Dr. Rajana Kumari, a director of the New Delhi-based Center for Social Research, on his opinion that the only way to prevent these crimes is to educate the masses, especially men, on the issues of violence, gender stereotyping, and the persuasive and negative impact of patriarchy. Simple protests only help for the time being. We need to look for a method that has long-lasting impacts, And as Mary Douglas, a British anthropologist, says, if you want to change the culture, you will have to start by changing the organization. So as I reach the end, I hope that my ideas and the stories that I've shared with you all has sparked interest in culture in at least some. And I plead with you all to dig past the surface, find the root causes, and act, please. Act, act, act. We have the capability to save lives simply by evaluating passed down beliefs, questioning traditions that have been followed for ages, and taking a stance against the attitudes that are causing these atrocities. So, by doing so, we are taking a step that is long overdue in the right direction. Thank you.